Hello, welcome to Bear Boldly Goes. I'll look at the original series era Star Trek films, motion picture through to Undiscovered Country. And today we are looking at Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
Yeah, the one that many consider the best of the entire run. And we'll find out today if we agree.
Question for you before we get into the film.
Hmm.
Khan's famous line.
Yes.
What is it?
Well, the whole one, or just the "he tasks me so"?
That one, because I did not hear
Yeah.
that this time.
No.
It's he tasks me so.
Hmm.
But watching it,
Yeah.
I could have sworn
Yeah.
he said, he asks me so. The T was non-existent. And because I watched the director's cut here and not the theatrical cut, I was wondering
Likewise.
if there is a difference. Or if I completely had misremembered.
You know what? Because it was about a month ago that I watched it. You might be right. I've got a vague memory of it sounding similar, of it being he asks me so. But then I can't remember what leads into that, because I know it's a longer.
It's his crewmate, his second in command, is kind of like, why are we throwing ourselves to death here? We can just go and be successful. We've got a spaceship, but Khan's wrapped up in his need for vengeance against Kirk.
And I think it's need to feel superior as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're watching this, let's face it, you know the backstory of Khan, but he was a character in the original series that was one of the more, I suppose, important villain of the week characters. And Gene Roddenberry chose to bring him back for Wrath of Khan and for the movies. In no small part, probably because the lead actor, the guy who played him, prominent actor, very well respected actor, so someone who, in theory, could have brought in a bit of extra audience himself. Ricardo Montalban, that's his name. So yeah, he was he's a genetically enhanced human from the 1990s in the eugenics wars, although in both TNG and in DS9 and even I think in Enterprise, they slightly tweak the dates in which they happen. You get the feeling that the period that in our universe we now live in was a bit of a dark ages in the Star Trek universe, because there is at least 2 World War IIIs that happen in that period. So potentially, if there was such turmoil, that solid set dates actually would be lost, a little bit like in the Dark Ages that we not remember, but we would refer to now. A super soldier. In fact, it's his, not him, but other members of a similar lost boat that are responsible for saving the Klingons from because the Klingons try to, inspired by seeing these people, try to genetically enhance their super soldiers. And it's actually humanity that has human genes that have to save them. That's how Star Trek obviously writes it out. Why in the original series they look at significantly more human. Yeah. Very important character comes back and he seeks vengeance on Kirk. not just because of the anger, but to prove that he is the superior being.
I mean, first off, it's an amazing film.
Oh yeah,
it deserves its credit as the, if not equally best Star Trek film.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone through periods in my life where like I sometimes think it is, and sometimes think it isn't, and I think it really, really depends on the mood that I'm in when I've watched it. And go on.
It's not my favorite Star Trek film. I don't think it will ever be my favorite Star Trek film,
and
it's not my personal best. But I think it's fair to call it objectively the best Star Trek film.
Yeah, I think that's probably the way. I mean, as you've just touched on, like for me, quite commonly, what I think the best of something is and what my favourite of something is are not necessarily the same thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes they are, but most of the time they do change. Obviously, in the other famous space series of the era, the Star Wars films, I don't think it's out of reach to say that Empire Strikes Back is the best. I don't necessarily believe it's my favourite.
No.
Certainly not anymore. I still think it's a wonderful film, and I think like Wrath of Khan is one that I've had a similar experience with. That I think when I was younger, I didn't necessarily appreciate quite how good it was. And it was actually only in this last viewing, really, that it kind of, I think I was in just the right mood for it, and it was the right time, and my head was in the right space for it. And that's when I think I suddenly realised actually how brilliant the film is. I've always thought it was very good, but I mean, this was
paced well, it's performed well. It's great writing, great acting,
yeah,
and some of the amazing effects work.
Yeah,
like sometimes you go back to a film of this era and looking at but the space, like the starship combat scenes, they're great.
They're simple, but they're really well executed. And I think, I mean, again, it's another example of where Star Trek aesthetically chose to go very differently to Star Wars, which obviously was probably the more popular of, at least in the cinema at the time.
Space.
They are big giant submarines in space, as opposed to being aircraft and dogfights and things. And in fact, some people have described this film as Hunt for Red October in space, and I mean, it's not. At times, it's not far from that. The final battle is within a nebula, and neither ship has accurate enough sensors to know where the other is, and it comes down to a battle of wits.
An experienced starship crew has a better understanding of 3D space than Khan, because even as smart as he is, he's from an era.
Well, he's from a slightly more advanced version of our era, so because obviously Khan was originally written in the late 60s, when I suppose either the dystopian or utopian view of the future was that technology was going to have advanced absolutely magnificently differently, and not that it hasn't, but I think that like we have advanced in different ways to what people expected in the 60s.
I think.
Sorry, just say that again.
I said I think our cultural view of Kirk, is of the action captain. He's the one who went to planets with his hammer fists fighting lizards. And obviously, that's the TV show, not the films. He's significantly an older man in the films. But all his victories in this film come from his wits. He knows how to outsmart Khan.
But then, I mean, again, I've recently rewatched the whole of the original series and the cartoon series as well, and I think that like original series Kirk gets a slightly bad rap because he is actually incredibly smart and incredibly like his wits are outrageously sharp. But I think because he was also a young man and a young actor who was willing to do fight scenes and wanted to do fight scenes and what have you. And of course, it was easy for them to do fight scenes than it was to do external battles in the 60s anyway. I think we almost wrongly forget how smart Kirk is.
This is also a film where we get introduced to the Kobayashi Maru.
Yes.
A test to teach students about the no-win scenario.
The no-win situation, yes. Yeah. Of course, Kirk believes there is no win situation. So, and I suppose that's almost it's a beautifully written piece to then demonstrate actually how close in character he and Khan actually are, because Khan doesn't believe he can be beaten, whereas Kirk thinks that there is no win situation.
And this whole film is designed to humble Kirk. Like, and to quote another Star Trek captain, sometimes you can do everything right and still lose.
Yep.
And it's why I think this film is a reboot almost.
Yeah, you were saying before we started. Yeah. Why do you think?
Because we tread a lot of the same themes of a motion picture in a much more bombastic, action-oriented film. But we start with Admiral Kirk tired of being behind the desk. I think the way this paints his arc through the same procedure is a lot more kinder to Kirk than the motion picture portrays it.
Yeah.
As well. But it's like Bones says to him that he needs to get his captainship back because before he turns into a relic.
Yeah.
And it is that same path. It starts with Admiral Kirk and him having to take over the Enterprise. And then his actions throughout that humbling him and bringing him back down to Earth a bit.
Yeah.
And because it starts in that manner, it's almost as if motion pictures arc hasn't happened.
I mean, I get you. I think obviously they didn't necessarily regret motion picture, but I do think that they decided after that it wasn't quite the right tone to go.
Motion picture very much stands alone. Why this feels like the first film of the next 5.
Yeah, I mean, like commonly there's a term for the Spock trilogy, which is this Search for Spock and Voyage Home, where this is potentially, I suppose, Spock's story. Although obviously, in previous episode when we were talking about motion picture, they're like, it's almost again in motion picture you see the beginning of Spock's story, because at the beginning of motion picture he's trying to be to find his full Vulcanness, and going forward a few films like Voyage Home, he almost by accident has achieved that full Vulcanness, and he's having to find his humanity again, and in this one it's at that point really where Spock and Kirk, their friendship and their shared humanity, their brotherhood, is at its peak.
I mean, spoilers for anyone who's not seen the film.
And again, I mean, it's as old as I am, so you've not had any excuses.
it has. This is a film that Spock sacrifices himself to save the ship because the needs of the many outweigh the needs of a one, of a few.
Yep.
And you get this heart-wrenching moment of Kirk realizing what he's done on the bridge. Like he knows before he's got there, and he hightails it through the.
Oh yeah, I mean it's
shit to get to him.
I mean we talked about before how I think like we're a bit unfair on Kirk, for being a bit dumb or what have you in the original series. I think we're like society is probably a little bit unfair on William Shatner, for his quality of acting, because like when he's fully in there, and in this film he is as like and especially right at the end, there is some magnificent acting on display there, and it still makes me cry a little bit. Like
between him and his son,
yeah,
when his son points out that because he's never admitted there's such a thing as a no-win scenario, this is truly the first time he's got to reckon with death.
Yeah,
which I think kind of paints a negative image because he's lost a lot of crew over the years at this point.
Yeah,
but
then he's only ever lost crew. He's never lost like that kind of immediate round table. Like obviously Bones is still there, and Chekhov's still there, and McCoy and Spock, and like
obviously you have triumph of the idea that at this point in time, Spock, Bones, and Kirk are brothers. And I think this trilogy explores this notion as well. So I think it's the idea that Bones is Kirk's friend, Spock is Kirk's friend, and those two can't really stand each other.
Yeah.
That much. But not even that. I think these 5 films again explore that notion,
that relationship. Yeah,
that Spock and Bones are as good friends as, and it's in Bones trying to stop him from going in there as well.
Oh yeah.
Like there's no way Bones would have let him do it, which is why he's got to do the nerve pinch to.
I mean, it's a nice like because obviously Bones does he becomes quite literally part of the trio in the end of the film, and obviously for the majority of the film that follows, and later on in the series in Undiscovered Countries, it's actually a rare occasion where it's Kirk and Bones together, as opposed to it being Kirk and Spock. And I thought that was quite a nice touch of allowing at that point almost the interchangeable trio.
Yeah.
That the three of them can work together beautifully, no matter which combination it is. I mean,
there's a scene that I know is in the director's cut. I don't know if it's in the theatrical cut, where Scotty loses his
nephew,
who's a fresh crewman of the ship. This is
prime redcoat.
This is a ship full of trainees. It's only the original kind of cast who are senior officers.
Yes, I mean at this point the ship's incredibly old for an active starship. It's become a training vessel because
it's had its fresh coat of paint in.
It did have its fresh coat of paint, but I mean even then it kind of was. I mean at that point it had 5 years under Robert April, 5 years under Pike, 5 years under Kirk, plus a missing 7 years, and that was leading up to the motion picture. So it was already 22 years old, or give or take, by the time of motion picture. So at this point, it's at least 25 years old, which even with a significant refit, it's going to be very, very outdated. So
I don't think in the law. I think even at this point, the Constitution class is still the flagship of for Federation.
Yeah, but potentially it would have been upgraded versions of, and like, so it might.
This is the latest, because they even say motion picture. It's basically a new ship.
Yeah.
They just never gave it.
But then it also then didn't necessarily have kind of working new tech as well, because obviously that was one of the issues in motion picture, that sometimes brand new tech isn't good because it hasn't had its testing ground yet. And again, I mean, they show that with this film. Like, there's it's this one that Excelsior's in, isn't it? It's in all three, isn't it? They introduce Excelsior in this one. I'm sure that it's in, and then of course it's in the next film.
That's not Excelsior. That's Reliant.
No, it's Excelsior. I'm sure it is.
It's for Reliant.
You sure?
Yeah, the ship, and it also gets destroyed.
I know it doesn't get destroyed.
It does. It gets blown up in the Genesis wave.
Does it?
The only other ship in this is one Khan steals.
No. No. No, it's the brand new ship, because it's the one that the same model that it ends up being the Enterprise B.
That is the Excelsior, the one that Sulu gets captainship of.
Yeah, but that's first.
Not in this.
I'm sure it's first. I'm sure it's shown in this one. I think it's just T, isn't it?
It's not in this film.
It's no. And it's in Voyage Home.
Yeah.
Not Search for fucking Voyage Home. Yeah.
And you're right. That is what Enterprise C is.
B.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. C is something else. Which I can never remember.
Is the one from yesterday's Enterprise.
It is, yeah. I actually quite like that design, but we're going a bit off topic.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the Excelsior class, because that's what it ends up being called, the Excelsior class. That's that little peak of the future, and I think,
yeah.
And I think that's part of. I mean, that's a big part of the whole of the story of all 6 of the Kirk films. Is that it's this older crew with its older ship, kind of dealing with age and not necessarily obsolescence, but the fact that there are newer things coming.
Although I do think more recent Star Trek canon shows us that ships stay in use for a long time. Like the Shenzhou has NX kind of style designs.
But but then they also they have since then, like whether it's in universe or just storytelling. Again, I mean, they would have had increased technological ability, replicators became more of a thing and stuff like that, so they could swap out parts a bit easier and what have you. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's a story, as I say, of being scared of age, scared of dying, scared of obsolescence. It's also the whole Kirk story, from motion picture to Undiscovered Country, follows. It's sort of an allegory for the Federation as a whole, because the Federation is finally coming from being something that wants to be an exploratory thing, but really still has to be a military division, to the exploratory thing that we then thought of in TNG.
That is, I think, one of the arcs explored throughout the entire film series is what happens to old soldiers during peacetime.
Yeah.
Like, how do they handle not being there anymore?
Yeah. I mean, obviously with Khan himself and his people, not only old soldiers, but soldiers who were built to be soldiers, literally, physically, from designed on the genetic level to be soldiers, and they're as old as they can get. I mean, they're literally out of their own time. They're 300 years old at this point, or 200 and something anyway.
Like, Khan is certainly not a clear-cut villain. I mean, he is. He's not a good person, but
no, I mean he's a genocidal maniac in his time.
Yeah.
He actually, depending on exactly what timeline you go with, he ruled the world briefly. So,
but his thirst for vengeance here isn't unfounded.
That's the thing. As evil as he may have been in our time, he is only necessarily after killing Kirk and his people because Kirk and his people, in his eyes, left them to die.
Yeah.
And of course, in the original series, they were put onto a fertile planet and allowed to try and create their own civilization. But as was the case with a few of the planets in the original series, Kirk told Starfleet to put it on a absolutely maximum level for like needs must. And no one was ever allowed to go there. So of course everyone just ignored the planet. And then obviously the story is that the neighboring planet exploded, which forced Khan's planet to change its orbit and drastically changed its climate. So of course, at the beginning of the film, Chekhov thinks he's on a different planet while doing a survey mission. So yeah, completely understandable that he's a bit angry.
I remember that. That worm scene.
Oh, yeah.
That's visually seared into my mind. I remember my dad was a big Star Trek fan growing up, and they had all the original series films on VHS. And we watched them, but Wrath of Khan was always left. So no, not quite yet. Someday,
I think it's the only 15, or it was. It may have been recertificated in the UK now. But I'm pretty sure it's the only 15 because at the time of its release in the UK, there wasn't a 12 certificate, which for Americans is PG-13 sort of. So it would have either been a PG or it would have jumped to a 15, which is the again American equivalent of an R. So it obviously just ticked just enough of the boxes to
18 the equivalent of in America then.
Sorry?
I thought R was 18.
It's a bit of both. Because the direct equivalent of an 18 in the States is an NC-17, but if you put an NC-17 on things, it doesn't make any money. So
interesting. Aren't certificates so much easier to understand when you just stamp an actual age on them?
Yep. But yeah, because obviously in the States, like you can take a kid in to see an R, as long as they're accompanied by a parent or a guardian or what have you.
I hear you can only do about 12 A's.
Yeah.
Well, 12A is, I guess it's not modern anymore, but 12A came about in my lifetime.
It was Spider-Man 1 that it was the first of the Tobey Maguire films. Was the one that pushed it into existence. That wasn't the first 12A, but it was the film that pushed it into existence. So, but yeah, so this was like, it was a 15. I think even now it's definitely a 12, and it probably should be a 12.
I definitely watched it before 15, but it was put to one side until I was a bit older. And I do remember the first time watching it, and the worm scene.
Yeah, I mean that was particularly graphic at the time, and it was. I mean, it was a very nice piece of filmmaking, really, because it does what a lot of good horror does, and it doesn't necessarily it wasn't too graphic, but it was graphic enough. And obviously, the idea of something of that size, I mean, anything crawling into your ear is horrible, but something that big, it's almost the size of your thumb.
Search for Spock is such a direct sequel. It's a miracle I understood anything about that film, having not seen.
Well, there's it tells you what happens at the begining. It runs through the whole the whole story at the beginning. Although, obviously I'll mention this again next time. But the video describing the Genesis device, obviously they couldn't get the rights to the voice of Carol Marcus for Search for Spock. So it's actually dubbed over with Kirk's voice, and it's like they just expect you to not notice. So he says exactly the same lines as Carol Marcus says it, when you see it in Wrath of Khan, like he's pitching it to Starfleet.
Yeah. The Genesis device, so yeah, makes
life
out of nothing.
Yeah, makes life out of nothing, or can take every ounce of life out of a planet.
Yeah.
Hence why
to create more life.
To create more life, but it will wipe out.
Yeah.
So obviously, like it is almost a perfect expansion of the idea of eugenics in a way. That and obviously everything that comes with eugenics, like ethnic cleansing and things like that. That like this is like I can design the planet that I want, and all I need to do is release this one thing, and that's why obviously someone like Khan
strict rulings on it not being used for that, and there's a sub arc of how the scientists are very distrustful that if Starfleet got their hands on it, it could very quickly become a weapon.
Yeah, which again, I mean, as we said before, is part of that arc of Starfleet themselves changing from more of a military group to a pure exploration and science group. That for us, for our generation, we have grown up on TNG and DS9 and Voyager and the likes, which all of those facilities are family facilities. Whereas obviously you go back and you watch the original series, and it's definitely a Navy vessel. There may be the odd husband and wife that are on there, but there are no children. It's a childless boat. So it's a really like fascinating. I think I don't before the recent rewatch. I don't think really I appreciated any of these films as much as I now do, and that includes number 5 when we get to it. I don't think any of I don't think I've given any of them the justice that they deserve, to be honest. I was shocked at how much I thought Motion Picture was. It's an incredible film, and Wrath of Khan, like it's now. I mean, well, let's get to the scores unless you've got so many any other thoughts, but
this franchise, and specifically this portion of the franchise, TOS movies. This is my Kirk and Spock and Bones and Uhuru and Sulu and Chekhov and Scotty. Like this is more than the original series.
Yeah,
this is the version of this crew I grew up with. When my mental image of Kirk and Co. is older Kirk and Co. And God, I love these films. This is my favorite. These 5 films, no, 6 films, sorry, are my favorite sci-fi franchise. I love Star Trek on a whole, but these 6 films are 6 of my favorite sci-fi films.
I think they work so well, don't they? And I think, like, even though obviously after, like, I mean, as you say, this is almost a reboot after they didn't fail but didn't do what they wanted to do with Motion Picture, and then after Voyage Home, like Final Frontier seems like no, we need another film, and then Undiscovered Countries. Final Frontier, yeah,
it isn't.
No, but I mean,
I like it.
But somehow, even though that felt like it was someone at Paramount said we have to have another film, and then Undiscovered Country was them going, yeah, we need another one because Final Frontier wasn't that good.
Yeah,
like we have to end this well.
Let's not let Shatner direct this one.
Yeah. Well, it went back to it went to Nimoy. No, it didn't.
No, isn't it the writer of Wrath of Khan?
It is the director of Wrath of Khan. He bookended it.
Yes.
However,
Nimoy's 2 films are pretty good.
Nimoy's 2 films are pretty good. And then obviously he directed loads of TV episodes and things as well. He directed this one, and so he sort of bookended it if you don't include motion picture.
Yeah, this film is a 5 for me.
I'd say that. Yeah. I'm not even gonna think about a decimal.
We mark out a 5, not 10. So
yeah. This is on our patented cold light of day scale, where a 3 is the worst score. Because
bang average.
Because the cold light of day is the most average film ever made. There is nothing good. There is nothing bad. There is nothing excellent or terrible. It is literally just there. And therefore, if you manage to hit a perfect 3, then you've possibly made one of the worst films ever made. But this, it's a hard 5. It's not a 4.8. It's not a 4.9. Like, it was. Again, I think you do have to have you've got to be in the right mood for it. I think you've got to have a certain taste in film, and not necessarily in science fiction. As you said, as we said before, this is often joked as Hunt for Red October in space. So it might be that it's more of if you're a fan of war films and things, which again could be something that held me back because I've never been a fan of war films, to be honest. So, but it is beautifully written. Incredibly well acted, even from Shatner, especially from Shatner, to be perfectly honest. It is a masterclass in this sort of filmmaking. Wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
And on that note, we shall bring you to a new segment of Bears Boldly Go, the Disco Corner.
Yep.
Not an actual disco, although it could be if you want it to be.
Well, let's see. I can see if I can. No, the lights are a bit too. The other lights. I've got some shiny lights on.
Maybe next week.
Maybe next week. Yeah, maybe next week. But yeah, Disco Corner. So obviously, when this airs, the 6th episode of season 3 of Star Trek Discovery will have aired.
We haven't seen it yet, though. But we are going to discuss the first 5 episodes here.
We're recording this on November 17th, 2020, and it's going to go live. Ooh, what is it? It's going to be the 30th, maybe something like that.
Say it, and I'm going to drop one of our 1 swears allowed per show.
Yep.
Disco season 3 is fucking amazing.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right. I know we have slightly differing opinions on season 1. I think it suffered a little bit of. It almost suffered a little bit of Joss Whedon's first 5 episodes syndrome with season 1, but then I think it found itself and leads into season 2. Season 2 convinced me that Discovery might be my favorite Star Trek TV series, and I think season 3 has made that might be a definitely this is my favorite Star Trek series.
That there's too much drama. But I don't think that lets up for what modern television is.
Yeah.
Like Discovery season 3 is, and I like Picard as well. I thought Picard was solid.
See, I wasn't as keen on Picard. I thought
Picard is solid. It's
solid. I think it could do what Discovery did, and its second season could be something phenomenal.
Picard has interesting things to say, but it doesn't quite hit always.
Picard felt a bit like the what do you call it, the JJ Star Trek and Star Wars films, to be honest. For me, it was just a little bit too kind of like, hey, do you remember this?
Yeah.
And look at Picard doing this. Like, you've seen that before.
At the end of Discovery Season 2, they rocket forward into the timeline further than we've ever seen before.
Yep. In any Star Trek.
Come out
about 200 years further than we've ever seen, because it's 200 years ish after the Temporal War finished,
which was shown in Enterprise.
So
we come out into a galaxy vastly changed. Burnham arrives first.
Yep.
And a year ahead of Discovery.
Yep.
And has to learn to live in this new world where the Federation has fallen.
Yeah. And it's a galaxy that is probably more similar to what you expect from Star Wars, or maybe Mass Effect or something like that.
Yeah.
In that it's a bit grungier, it's a bit darker, it's people out for themselves. Although it is something that like is touched upon in certain aspects of Star Trek. That like when you're outside of Federation territories and you encounter a species that isn't necessarily affiliated with the Klingons or the Romulans or etc. etc.
I mean, one of the big issues with Discovery Season 1 as well was the crew weren't fleshed out. They were interchangeable.
Yeah.
Season 2 starts to fix that.
Because it was very much Michael's show.
Yeah.
And obviously, God, what's his name? Plays Saru.
Doug Jones.
Doug Jones, yeah. Obviously,
this show allows everyone to discover how awesome Doug Jones is.
Oh yeah, but I think like obviously in season 1 he was the one that was kind of stealing it in a way. It was definitely meant to be Michael's show. But Saru just again, Doug Jones's quality just took you just that little bit, and I'm glad that the character has been expanded and
and a lot of the other characters as well, the bridge crew, the senior officers have all started to be fleshed out more and more.
Yeah.
So they've got personalities, they've got characters, you care about them. Season 2 started to do that, and Season 3's really hammered it home. It's not... Michael is great, but it's not the Michael show.
No, it isn't. And it's become... I think, obviously going back to the previous topic on this show, on this particular episode, of the fact that like the 6 Kirk and Co. films are all about brotherhood or family, about the whole crew. That's what this is about. This is very much echoing that, especially in season 3, where they're all by themselves, essentially, in what's a foreign land.
Into a future and left everything behind.
So they only have each other. And there is a wonderful sense of camaraderie, and yet also they deal with the stresses of it very nicely as well. Where they're all obviously scared, they're all obviously worried, and feeling a bit lonely, because they realise that all of their family, everyone they've ever known, is now 900 years dead. Which must be, I mean, something that we will never experience.
Yeah,
like, it's unfathomable what that must feel like.
And Michael,
but I think
for that for a year on her own before she managed to
pretty much,
Discovery,
because it's got
further along the acceptance process than the rest of them.
Because she had to do it by herself.
Yeah.
Well, not quite by herself, but no. Without any of the people that she knew, anyway.
And even in that very first episode where Burnham lands and she meets this courier, because it feels like illicit couriering is what makes the galaxy run these days.
Yeah, it's like Death Stranding.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, yeah. And then...
Or click and collect in this strange 2020.
But her Federation ideals manage to inspire who she's with. And he takes her to an old... God, did this moment get me? Like, there's this old Federation way station.
Yeah.
Where this man has just been working there for years doing his job. Well, not doing his job. Doing the job his dad had and his granddad had. It's pointed out that he's not an enlisted officer. He's just doing what his parent did.
It's become the family business,
Yeah. And he asks Michael to put up the Federation flag, and she enlists him so he can do it himself. There's just a moment that the Federation may have fallen, but they can still bring that hope to this darker universe. And in the last episode we watched, they found the Federation.
Yeah.
Now. But even then, the Federation is a closed-off, secular section. They do what they can, but they're not trusting. They're not.
But then none of them lived through the Federation that was.
No.
And even the oldest ones, it would have been their grandparents that would have experienced the temporal wars. They would have, they would have been the ones that had lived through the burn. Which of course we haven't mentioned yet. The burn is somehow the majority of active dilithium in the entire galaxy.
Yeah.
They don't know whether it's in the universe, but definitely in the entire galaxy, just exploded. And
so
with that,
has two strengths.
It
can jump without dilithium because of mushrooms. And
vegan space travel.
It has a shed load of dilithium on it as well.
Yeah. And the ability to recrystallize it.
Yeah.
Probably.
But I think Star Trek and Superman, and superheroes in general, but Superman specifically, have similar reasons to like them for me. It's for hope, it's the ideal. You can look at a darker side of the Federation as long as the heroes remain. I do think it's something Picard did manage to pull off, in that in the era of Picard, the Federation has lost its way.
But then in the era of Picard, that's potentially just because the heads of the Federation are the wrong heads.
Yeah. Star Trek has always had a thing with corrupt admirals, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that, it's the Federation as a whole has lost its way, but maybe...
But Picard remains Picard amongst that. He's still... We're not looking at a dark Picard. Picard is still...
Well, again, I mean, he's a man out of his time. He's playing the real age of Patrick Stewart, which is quite. In fact, no, he's playing significantly older than Patrick Stewart's real age, isn't he? So he's a very old man, and has huge amounts of experience, and has seen the good and the bad and the indifferent. He's been in wars. He's been a Borg. So it's a. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I know that they seem to be implying that they want to do some sort of shared universe thing. Like there was someone who said that they wanted to do a Defenders style thing, like with the Netflix TV show. I do wonder how they're going to.
I don't think they will.
I mean, they could and they might not. It depends on what's going on with the burn and whether
also different. That I'm not entirely convinced they will. But I think that's the thing, right? You can explore this dark galaxy. Discovery has to be
that beacon
of hope in the center of it.
You see, for
I what were you going to say? Sorry.
Why? Go on.
Okay, I was going to say, and they found the Federation now, so it's kind of moot. But I almost wanted them to never find the remnants of a Federation. It had truly gone.
Yeah.
But them jumping from planet to planet to try and find it is what brought it back. Like Discovery zapping through space, helping these struggling planets out.
I mean, that's probably what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's still.
I mean, now it's just now that they've got a base. Yeah. Like it very much is Mass Effect now, because they're going to go on some oh god, what are they called? The missions that you go on Mass Effect 2 and 3.
I've seen a clip.
The loyalty missions.
Yeah. I've seen a clip from episode 6 where the Admiral is giving all his captains orders like, okay, this planet is struggling, you go there.
Yeah.
It'll take you 2 weeks to get there, kind of thing. And Saru, like, well, I could probably get to all of them. Yeah. And the Admiral's like, yes, but you're also my only fast response ship. So something somewhere goes really bad. I need you here so I can just
send you there.
Send you straight there. And there was a wonderful moment in episode 5 where Saru stays behind at Federation HQ as a hostage, technically, because we don't quite trust Discovery yet. And Discovery, obviously Michael takes command of Discovery. And it was a moment when she was standing. Saru's definitely the right choice to be captain.
Yeah.
But when Michael was standing in the centre while the distrusting current era Federation security officers were on the bridge, and she calls the black alert for them to.
She's certainly the right Riker for this ship.
Yes.
She's the right Worf in the case of Worf when he's in Deep Space Nine.
She's the right lead.
Because obviously Worf became essentially the captain of the Defiant in Deep Space Nine. So yeah, she's the battle captain almost. And I think it's they've just done such a really nice job with all of them, to be honest. As you say, I mean, all the characters get like that nice little fleshing out and just that little bit of something extra, and
you know,
they all count
this season. No, what's his face?
What's his face?
The really blank Klingon who's not a Klingon, but is a Klingon.
Blank Klingon who's not a Klingon, but is
Michael's love interest.
Oh, that one. Yes. Yeah.
That's how bland he is.
Yeah. Clem Fandango from Toast of London.
And just say Michelle Yeoh. So good in this show.
Oh, she's just getting to have fun, isn't she? They're just like, do you want to just stay around? You won't always be obviously part of the main plot. So you can just have some scenes where you just get to knob around. Yeah. And what the hell's David Fincher doing?
David Fincher?
Is it David? It is Fincher, isn't it?
Oh, it's
Cronenberg. That's it.
Yeah, David Cronenberg.
Yeah.
Why is David Cronenberg in Star Trek?
And what is he doing? Is this ultra meta? Is it actually David Cronenberg? And David Cronenberg has somehow managed to infiltrate the Star Trek universe.
I have theories, and I think I'll say them now to see if they prove to be.
Go on.
Right.
Go on.
Something to do with the current era of Section 31.
Yeah, that's where I was leaning to.
Yeah. also a Terran?
See, that I'm not sure of.
He was very familiar with Terrans.
He was, but then there's a lot of there's probably a surprising amount of data, like just because the episodes that we've seen make out that there's relatively little. Because obviously,
like even he implies that as soon as she comes back, the universe has started splitting away from each other.
Although you do get one crossover in TNG, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think there's any in any others.
No, I think it's a nice way to explain.
Is there one in Voyager?
No.
I know there's a whole almost there's like a mini season almost in Enterprise.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, I'm very much enjoying it so far. What I was going to say earlier is and it's only really just struck me, but season 3 in particular is giving me the feel of like someone has finally managed to get an American Doctor Who working. Like,
I can kind of see where you feel that, yeah.
Especially as you're now getting to see the Strange New Worlds, and you're seeing the like the little bits of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this, and like also, it's less political and more grimy
because it's no longer a prequel as well. It's no longer beholden.
Yeah, so they can go nuts.
Yeah,
and in that, and again, I think like given the strength of recent Doctor Who's as well, like since the not reboot but the rebirth, like Eccleston onwards, how grand they've managed to make Doctor Who, and yet at the same time have it grounded and have it be the way that Doctor Who should be, of its this beacon of hope, this very broken individual, and the fact that he needs a family around him to stop him from finally breaking himself. And then, of course, the little things like the fact that the ship is alive, like because obviously in one of the short treks, it's quite obviously that it's an even later version of Discovery that's become alive because of the sphere data, and they've teased that in in an episode so far.
I love when the ship's computer clearly was alive, kind of as
yeah, gained sentience because of all that data.
Yeah. I was just like spoke to Saru, and Saru was like, "What?" She's like, "Nope, nothing here."
Yeah, I mean, it's because obviously we've seen that episode of Short Trek. It's going to be interesting to see how they get to it.
Yeah.
Like, how do they get to a completely empty Discovery that has now been populated by a man who's salvaged it, essentially?
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Maybe we never get there. Maybe that's a future that's avoided.
It could be an extreme future.
Yeah,
that's the thing. Like, it could be up to them how they deal with it as well. Because it could be so far in the future that the current crew have died. They've moved on. They've gone on to different so.
But it's also how you make the fact that they're flying around in an antique van because it's got a computer that's arguably more sophisticated than even anything in the future. And it's got a spore drive.
Yeah. And of course, in its time, it was essentially brand new. Like, it's only 2-3 years old at most.
But it would be an antique compared to even.
Oh yeah, I know, yeah.
Even.
But everything still works well. Right? That's what I mean. Like that, it's yes, it's old technology, but it's old technology that still works. And in a time where new technology
doesn't work,
But I mean, in a time where like new technology doesn't work because there's no dilithium.
Yeah, like an antique warp drive is still better than no warp drive.
Yeah, exactly.
We also had a wonderful Trill episode that did a bit of a deep dive into Trills.
They have, which I had a thought a few days before the show that particular episode aired. Because obviously Star Trek is always ahead of the curve as far as dealing with social and political things. Like it's the first on-screen interracial kiss, at least in American television. And it just suddenly hit me that the Trill are quite the first proper deep dive that Star Trek had made into trans and like non-binary characters.
It's become a meme in recent years that Klingons say trans lives matter, right? Trans rights matter. So you've got that scene in Deep Space Nine where Dax meets her old Klingon friend.
Yeah.
He calls her by her old name. And she corrects him, and his only response is he says the new name. It's like, because I think it's whatever old name, my old friend. And she's like, no, it's what a new name is. It's like, and then he says that name, my old friend. Yeah, it was Star Trek, I think, leaning in to that, exploring that.
I mean,
it's in the 90s.
Yeah, which again, like, I mean, it's only really become a. I don't want to use the word popular, but like popular in the sense that it's populating things. But like
something worth mentioning, it's not anything that's remotely new. As long as history has existed, we have historical records of trans people living throughout history.
Oh yeah. But it's always been, as with homosexuality and with mixed race
thing where
and things like that.
Describe it away.
Like, it's always been a taboo subject.
You have historians say, look at these really good friends. These two people who live together, just friends.
Yeah, and like Abraham Lincoln and his just friend. But I mean, Star Trek has never been scared to do that, and for such a mainstream product as well, that for them to do that and do it so well and get the balance right as well, because I think obviously, like with the Trill in DS9, again, it's taken me 20 years to realize what they were doing.
Yeah, well,
and yet it's there, and that idea is there, and the topic has been discussed, and you don't even necessarily realize you have discussed it. And so if something like that can be done and it can get into the psyche of the populace, then fantastic.
To normalize stuff like this.
Well, the thing is, if you make it normal without it being, especially if it's not overt, I think obviously like George Takei had an issue with Sulu being outed, I suppose, in
because his Sulu wasn't.
Because his Sulu wasn't, but he also might have been. The thing is, obviously, he could have been bisexual. I think Sulu probably was, to be honest. Like it's all.
I kind of lean into that far in the future.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, they're that far in the future that they're bonking other species, which is essentially bestiality. That
Riker, right? It's not.
What the heck? I mean, it is.
Like how horny was Riker?
Right? Yeah, Riker has sex with someone every single week. Like,
I saw a joke around that those medical scientists who probably took. It's like, oh yeah, it's someone's job to go through the holodecks kind of waste practices just to see what diseases Riker may have caught this week and study them.
It's also like, how does like the holodeck must have incredible cleaning processes, like, because I know obviously it turns energy into matter and then matter back into energy, but like after Riker's been and done,
Lower Deck canonizes it.
Does it?
It's someone's job. Clearing out the waste from the holodecks is a job.
And on that note, I think we'll leave it for this week. So yeah, we're going to make our way through the other 4 Kirk era films, which will be our content leading up till the end of the year.
Think so, yes.
Yes.
So yeah, if you join us next week for a search for a Vulcan called Spock and a probably much shorter Disco Corner.
Yes, because we'll just be on episode 6 of season 3. We say this,
Star Trek thoughts.
It could be tremendous. We might have a lot to talk about. So, on that note, live long and prosper, Qapla', and all that.